The morning sun filtered through the massive windows of Terminal 7 on the space station orbiting Mars. Captain Maya Collins stood in line with her boarding pass clutched in one hand and her small carry-on bag in the other. She wore civilian clothes today, a simple blue jacket and comfortable pants. Nothing that would draw attention to her rank or position. Her dark skin gleamed under the artificial lights as she moved forward with the crowd of passengers heading toward the luxury starliner called the Celestial Horizon. Maya had traveled this route many times before, but always in her military uniform with all the proper credentials and security details that came with being a high-ranking officer. This time was different. This time she wanted to see what ordinary humans experienced when they traveled through Coalition space, without the protection of rank or title. She had heard the complaints and read the reports about discrimination against human passengers, but experiencing it firsthand would give her the evidence she needed for the upcoming negotiations. The year was 2287, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Coalition for almost 30 years now. It had been a rough 3 decades filled with setbacks and small victories. Humans were still considered newcomers by most alien species, primitives who had barely mastered interstellar travel before stumbling into a galaxy filled with civilizations thousands of years older. Maya had spent most of her adult life fighting to change that perception through diplomacy and military service. She had brokered peace deals, saved colonies, and earned the respect of many alien leaders. But respect at the top didn't always trickle down to ordinary interactions. As she boarded the ship, Maya noticed the looks from other passengers, some curious, some dismissive. The Celestial Horizon was a beautiful vessel with polished metal corridors and luxurious seating areas. It catered to wealthy travelers from dozens of different species. Maya had paid full price for her first-class ticket using her personal credits rather than her military account. She wanted no special treatment, no flags in the system that might alert anyone to who she really was. She found her seat near the front of the cabin by a large viewport that showed the vast expanse of space beyond. The seat was comfortable with plenty of legroom and a small console for entertainment and meals. Maya settled in and placed her carry-on bag in the overhead compartment above her seat. The bag contained some personal items, a change of clothes, and a data pad with encrypted files related to her mission. She was traveling to the Coalition, capital world for secret negotiations that could determine whether humans would finally receive full voting rights in the Galactic Council. The other passengers continued to board, and Maya watched them with quiet interest. There were tall Quillarians, with their insect-like features and chittering voices. A family of Morthani lumbered past, massive beings with thick gray skin and 3 eyes. Several Vrexians moved through the cabin with their reptilian grace and scaled skin that shimmered in shades of green and blue. No other humans were visible in first class. A flight attendant appeared in the aisle, a Vrexian female with deep emerald scales and sharp golden eyes. Her name tag read, Zara. She moved down the aisle checking passengers and making adjustments with quick, efficient movements. When she reached Maya's row, she stopped and her eyes narrowed. Maya looked up and offered a polite smile. Zara did not return it. Instead, the Vrexian's gaze traveled from Maya's face to the overhead compartment above her seat. Without warning, Zara reached up, opened the compartment, and grabbed Maya's bag. "Excuse me," Maya began, but Zara cut her off. "This doesn't belong here." Zara's voice was cold and sharp. "Human. Belongings don't belong in first-class storage." Maya felt a spike of anger but kept her voice calm and steady. "I paid for this seat just like everyone else. That bag contains important materials, and it needs to stay with me." Zara's lip curled into something close to a sneer. She pulled the bag out completely and tossed it toward the back of the cabin where cargo and lower priority luggage were stored. The bag hit the floor with a dull thud. "Your kind should know your place by now," Zara said, her voice dripping with contempt. If you have complaints, you can file them through proper channels, not that anyone will listen to a human. Several other passengers turned to watch the exchange. A few looked uncomfortable, but no. One spoke up. Maya remained seated, her hands folded in her lap. She could feel her heart pounding, but years of military discipline kept her expression neutral. "I would like my bag returned, please," Maya said quietly. Zara turned away dismissively. "You'll get it back when we land. Maybe." She walked toward the front of the cabin to attend to other passengers, leaving Maya sitting alone in her seat. Maya took a slow breath and looked out the viewport. She didn't move to retrieve her bag or make a scene. This was exactly what she had come to witness: the casual cruelty, the everyday discrimination that humans faced when they traveled without protection or rank. It stung more than she had expected. What Zara didn't know, what none of the passengers or crew knew, was that every moment of the exchange had been recorded by the ship's internal security system. The Celestial Horizon, like all coalition vessels, was equipped with cameras and sensors that monitored passenger safety and crew behavior. And Maya's identity, even though she was traveling under minimal credentials, had been flagged by the ship's artificial intelligence the moment she boarded. The AI had recognized her biometric signature and cross-referenced it with coalition records. It knew exactly who she was: Captain Maya Collins, commander of the diplomatic vessel, Pathfinder senior advisor to the Coalition Council, and one of the most decorated officers in human history. The AI had immediately sent an encrypted alert to the proper authorities noting that a high-ranking official was aboard and that unusual activity had been detected. Maya didn't know it yet, but that alert was already racing through the Coalition communication network. It was being reviewed by security analysts, flagged for priority attention, and forwarded to the one person who would take immediate and decisive action. As the Celestial Horizon prepared for departure and the engines began their low rumble, Maya sat quietly in her seat watching the stars. She thought about her mission, about the negotiations ahead, about what this moment meant for every human who would travel these routes after her. She didn't feel victorious or vengeful. She felt tired and determined. Somewhere in the back of the cabin, her bag lay forgotten on the floor. Light years away on a Coalition space station orbiting a distant moon, First Officer Lisa Chen sat at her console reviewing the daily security reports. Lisa was Maya's second-in-command aboard the Pathfinder, and she had been monitoring Maya's journey with quiet concern. The captain had insisted on traveling alone without security, without the usual protocols. Lisa understood why, but that didn't make it easier to watch from afar. The console beeped, a priority alert. Lisa's hand moved to the screen and her eyes widened as she read the message. It was an automated security report from the Celestial Horizon, flagged with the highest level of urgency. The ship's AI had detected discriminatory behavior directed at a passenger who had been identified as Captain Maya Collins. Lisa pulled up the attached video footage and watched in silence as Zara grabbed Maya's bag and threw it aside. She watched as the Vrexian flight attendant spoke words dripping with contempt. She saw Maya's calm response, the way she held herself together, even as she was being humiliated in front of other passengers. Lisa's jaw tightened. She played the footage again to make sure she had seen it correctly. Then she reached for her communication panel and entered a code that would connect her directly to the Coalition Legal Division. "Get me Darius Kane," Lisa said when the operator answered. "Now." There was a pause, a moment of confusion on the other end of the line. Darius. Kane was not someone you simply called without going through multiple channels. He was the chief legal officer of the entire coalition, a position of immense power and responsibility. But Lisa's credentials were legitimate, and the urgency in her voice cut through any protocol. "Hold, please," the operator said. Lisa waited, drumming her fingers on the console. Through the viewport beside her, she could see the curved surface of the moon below and the distant stars beyond. She thought about Maya sitting alone on that ship with her bag thrown aside like garbage. The captain could have revealed herself, could have stopped the whole thing with a word. But she hadn't. That meant Maya wanted this documented, wanted it to play. Out. The screen flickered and a man's face appeared. Sharp features, steel gray hair, and eyes that seemed to see right through the camera. Darius Kane looked like he had been in the middle of reading something important, but his expression shifted to full attention when he saw Lisa. First Officer Chen. Darius said, his voice deep and measured. "This is unexpected. What requires my immediate attention?" Lisa didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm sending you a security file from the Starliner Celestial Horizon. Captain Maya Collins was subjected to discriminatory treatment by a crew member approximately 30 minutes ago. The incident was recorded by the ship's AI." Darius's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He pulled up a secondary screen and accessed the file Lisa had sent. She watched his face as he reviewed the footage, once, then twice, then a third time. His jaw tightened with each viewing. When he finally looked back at Lisa, his voice was cold and precise. "Has Captain Collins filed a formal complaint?" "No, sir," Lisa replied. "She's traveling under minimal credentials. I don't think she's revealed her identity to the crew." Darius leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. His mind was already moving through the implications, the legal frameworks, the precedents. This wasn't just about one incident on one ship. This was about the entire system, about whether the Coalition's promises of equality were real or just empty words. Darius Kane had built his career on one fundamental principle: the law applies to everyone equally or it applies to no one. He had prosecuted corrupt officials, defended wrongly accused aliens, and rewritten entire sections of Coalition legal code to close loopholes that allowed discrimination to flourish. He was respected and feared in equal measure, and he was human. That fact mattered more than most people realized. Darius had grown up on Earth during the early days of human integration into the Coalition. He had seen his parents denied service at alien-owned establishments. He had watched his sister passed over for promotions because humans were seen as less capable. He had carried those memories with him through law school, through his early cases, through every decision he made. This case was personal. Scramble a legal enforcement team. Darius said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "I want every member of the Celestial Horizon's crew in custody within 2 hours. No exceptions." Lisa blinked. "The entire crew, sir. Every single one." Darius confirmed. "The flight attendant committed the act, but the captain and senior crew are responsible for maintaining a discrimination-free environment. If they allowed this culture to exist, they're complicit. I also want the ship impounded and a full review of their operational procedures." "Yes, sir," Lisa said, trying to keep the satisfaction out of her voice. Darius's eyes narrowed slightly. "And First Officer Chen, make sure Captain Collins knows we're taking action. She may be traveling incognito, but she's still a Coalition officer, and she deserves to know that justice is being served. I'll send her a secure message," Lisa replied. The screen went dark as Darius ended the call. Lisa sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. She had expected action, but not this swift or this comprehensive. Darius Kane didn't do things halfway. Within minutes, alerts began cascading through the Coalition network. Legal enforcement vessels received deployment orders. Prosecutors were pulled from other cases. The entire machinery of Coalition justice began moving with singular focus on one Starliner and its crew. The Celestial Horizon had no idea what was coming. Back on the ship, Maya sat quietly in her seat watching the stars slip past. The ship had entered faster than light travel, and the viewport showed the strange distorted colors of hyperspace. Other passengers had settled in, some sleeping, some reading, some talking in low voices. Maya's personal communicator buzzed softly, a message on her private encrypted channel. She pulled it out and read Lisa's brief update. Legal enforcement. En route. Full crew detainment authorized. Kane himself is handling the case. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. She had hoped for accountability, but she hadn't expected this level of response. Darius Kane's involvement meant this was going to become much bigger than one incident. It was going to become a statement. She looked toward the front of the cabin where Zara was serving drinks to a group of Kolarian passengers. The Vrexian moved with casual confidence, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. Maya felt no satisfaction in what was coming, only a quiet sense of purpose. This needed to happen. Not for her sake, but for every human who would come after her. 2 hours after departure, the Celestial Horizon was cruising through hyperspace on what should have been a routine journey. Captain Vex sat in his command chair reviewing supply manifests and crew reports. He was a Quillarian, tall and thin, with chitinous plates covering his body and multiple eyes that allowed him to monitor several screens at once. He ran a tight ship, or so he believed, and took pride in the Celestial Horizon's reputation as a luxury vessel. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of instruments and the occasional click of mandibles as crew members communicated. Vex was reviewing a complaint about the temperature in one of the cabins when his communications officer suddenly stiffened. "Captain," the officer said, his voice high and tight, "we're receiving an override command from Coalition Legal Enforcement." Vex's multiple eyes swiveled toward the communication station. "An override command? That's highly unusual. What do they want?" "They're ordering us to drop out of hyperspace immediately and prepare for boarding." The officer's hands trembled as he read the message. "They're sending 6 enforcement vessels, Captain, armed vessels." Vex stood up from his chair, his mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. 6 vessels. What could possibly did we miss a customs check? Is there contraband on board? Before anyone could answer, the entire ship shuddered as the autopilot engaged the emergency hyperspace exit. The distorted colors of faster-than-light travel vanished and were replaced by the normal starfield. And surrounding them in a perfect formation were 6 sleek enforcement vessels, their hulls painted in the distinctive black and gold of Coalition Legal. Weapon systems on all 6 ships were active, not aimed at the Celestial Horizon but ready. The main screen flickered, and a human face appeared. Vex recognized him immediately. Everyone in Coalition space knew Darius Kane. The chief legal officer's expression was carved from stone. "Captain Vex." Darius said, his voice formal and cold. "This is Chief Legal Officer Darius Kane of the Coalition Legal Division. You are hereby ordered to halt all operations and surrender your entire crew for immediate questioning. Your vessel is under investigation for violations of the Sentient Rights Accord." Vex's mandibles clacked together in shock. The Sentient Rights Accord. But, Chief Kane, surely there's been some mistake. We run a proper vessel, we follow all regulations. There is no mistake. Darius cut him off. "You have 5 minutes to open your airlocks and allow my teams aboard. Any resistance will result in immediate prosecution and the permanent revocation of your captain's license. Do you understand?" Vex looked around his bridge at his crew. They all stared back at him with equal confusion and fear. He had no choice. When the chief legal officer himself showed up with 6 armed vessels, "You didn't argue, I understand." Vex said, his voice barely above a whisper, "We will comply." The screen went dark. Vex turned to his crew. "Open all airlocks. Send a ship-wide alert that Coalition enforcement is boarding. All crew members are to remain at their stations and cooperate fully." Throughout the ship, passengers and crew alike received the alert. Confusion spread like wildfire. In the first-class cabin, Zara was pouring a drink for a Morthani passenger when her personal communicator buzzed with the message. She frowned, reading it twice to make sure she understood coalition enforcement. She muttered, "What could they possibly want with us?" She looked around the cabin, and her eyes landed on Maya, who sat calmly in her seat watching the viewport. The human woman showed no reaction to the alert, no fear or confusion. Just that same quiet composure she had maintained since boarding. Something cold settled in Zara's stomach, but she pushed it aside. This couldn't have anything to do with her. She had just been doing her job, maintaining standards. Humans didn't belong in first class. Everyone knew that, even if no one said it out loud. The airlocks opened with a hiss, and enforcement officers poured into the ship. They moved with military precision, spreading through every corridor, every cabin, every section. They were armed with stunners and restraints, and they wore the distinctive armor of Coalition Legal's Tactical Division, Darius. Kane himself led the main boarding party. He strode onto the bridge, flanked by a dozen officers, and came face to face with Captain Vex. The Quillarian tried to stand tall, but his mandibles were clicking nervously. "Chief Kane," Vex said, attempting a respectful tone. "I assure you, whatever violation occurred, we will address it immediately." "There's no need for..." Captain Vex. Darius interrupted. "You are being detained for negligence in maintaining a discrimination-free environment on your vessel. Your crew will be questioned individually. Your ship's logs and security footage are being confiscated. You will cooperate fully or face additional charges." "But what discrimination?" Vex's voice rose in pitch. "Who was discriminated against? I demand to know." "You demand nothing," Darius said quietly, but with such force that Vex took a step back. "You will be informed of the charges in due time. For now, you will remain silent and allow my officers to do their work." 2. Officers moved forward and placed restraints on Vex's wrists. The captain didn't resist. He couldn't. The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in. This wasn't a minor issue. This was serious. In the first-class cabin, Zara watched as enforcement officers entered and began speaking to passengers. One officer, a tall human woman with sharp eyes, approached her directly. "Zara of Vrex," the officer said, reading from a data pad. "You are being detained for questioning regarding a violation of the Sentient Rights Accord. Please come with me." Zara's scales paled. "Me? But I haven't done anything wrong." The officer didn't argue. She simply gestured toward the door. "Please come with me. Resisting will only make this worse." Zara looked around desperately. Other crew members were being escorted away. Passengers watched with wide eyes. And there, sitting calmly in her seat, was the human woman, Maya. Their eyes met for just a moment. Maya's expression was unreadable. Zara felt her legs go weak. No, it couldn't be. That human was nobody, just another primitive passenger. But as she was led away toward the airlock, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A security detail had entered the cabin, professional armed guards who moved to stand near Maya's seat. They weren't restraining her. They were protecting her. One of the guards spoke to Maya with clear respect. "Captain Collins, we're here to escort you safely if you..." "Karstu Captain." The word echoed in Zara's mind as she was pulled through the airlock onto the enforcement vessel. Captain. Not a passenger. Not some random human. A captain. Zara's world tilted. She had just assaulted and humiliated a captain. And not just any captain. Someone important enough that Darius Kane himself had responded. Someone protected by armed guards. Someone whose identity had triggered the largest enforcement action Zara had ever seen. "Oh no," Zara whispered. "Oh no. But it was too late. The restraints were on her wrists and the airlock was sealing behind her. 3 days later, Zara found herself standing in the Central Legal Complex, a massive structure that orbited the coalition capital world. The building was made of crystalline material that caught and refracted light in beautiful patterns, but Zara couldn't appreciate any of it. She was terrified. The hearing room was enormous, with high ceilings and walls that seemed to go on forever. 7 judges sat at an elevated bench, each representing a different species within the coalition. There was a Morthani with thick gray skin, a Colarian with glittering compound eyes, a Kordaxian with flowing tentacles, and yes, a human. A human judge sat among them with equal authority, equal voice. Zara stood in the defendant's area, flanked by 2 enforcement officers. Her attorney, a slick Kordaxian named Brel, stood beside her, shuffling data pads and looking far less confident than he had during their initial consultation. The gallery behind them was filled with observers, reporters, and legal scholars. This case had become news across the entire coalition. Darius Kane stood at the prosecutor's table, his posture straight, his expression focused. He had spent the past 3 days building his case, reviewing every piece of evidence and preparing witnesses. Now he was ready. The lead judge, a towering Morthani named Korath, activated the recording systems and spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. This hearing will now commence. We are here to determine whether Zara of Rex and Captain Vex of the Celestial Horizon violated the Sentient Rights Accord through acts of discrimination. Chief Legal Officer Kane, you may begin. Darius stepped forward, and his voice carried clearly through the chamber. Thank you, honored judges. This case is straightforward, but its implications are profound. For 3 decades, humanity has been part of the Galactic Coalition. We were promised equality, promised respect, promised that we would be judged by our actions, not by our species. The Sentient Rights Accord was created to protect all beings from discrimination, regardless of their origin. He paused, letting his words sink in. Yet on the 5th day of last month, a high-ranking coalition officer, a decorated captain who has served this alliance with distinction, was subjected to blatant discrimination aboard a civilian vessel. She was targeted not because of any action she took, not because of any violation of policy, but solely because she is human. Darius activated a holographic display, and the security footage from the Celestial Horizon appeared floating in the air. The entire courtroom watched in silence as Zara grabbed Maya's bag and threw it aside. They heard Zara's words, human. Belongings don't belong in first class. Your kind should know your place. The footage played through. When it ended, Darius let the silence stretch for a moment. That is Captain Maya Collins, Darius said. Commander of the diplomatic vessel, Pathfinder, senior advisor to the Coalition Council, negotiator of the Tarnix Accords, which brought peace to 3 warring species. A woman who has given her life to serving this coalition. He turned to face Zara directly, and she was treated like garbage because of the color of her skin and the planet she was born on. Zara's scales had turned pale. She couldn't meet Darius's gaze. Brel, the defense attorney, stood up quickly. Honored judges, my client acknowledges that an error in judgment occurred. However, she was not aware of the passenger's identity or rank. This was a misunderstanding, not a deliberate act of discrimination. Darius turned sharply. That is precisely the point. He didn't raise his voice, but the force of his words filled the room. Her actions were not based on Captain Collins's rank or position. They were based solely on her being human. If Captain Collins had been Vrexian or Morthani, or any other species, she would not have been treated that way. That is the definition of discrimination. The human judge leaned forward. Defense counsel. Your client's lack of knowledge about the victim's identity is not a defense. The law protects all beings equally. A human civilian has the same rights as a human captain. Brell's tentacles drooped. He had no counter-argument. Judge Korath spoke. Does the defendant wish to make a statement? Zara looked at her attorney, who nodded reluctantly. She stepped forward, her voice shaking. I didn't mean to cause harm. Humans are still new to the coalition, and I thought they needed to understand that there are certain standards, certain expectations. Her voice trailed off. Even as she spoke the words, she realized how hollow they sounded. A voice rang out from the gallery. You thought what? Every head turned. Maya Collins stood from her seat in the observer section. She wore her full military uniform now, dark blue with medals and insignia that marked her rank and achievements. She looked every inch the decorated officer she was. Judge Korath inclined his massive head. Captain Collins, you have the floor. Maya walked forward with measured steps. When she reached the center of the room, she turned to face Zara directly. You thought we were beneath you. Maya said, her voice calm but cutting. You thought our rights were negotiable. You thought that because we're younger than other species, because we come from one small planet, because we haven't been traveling the stars for thousands of years, that somehow we deserve less respect. Zara couldn't respond. She stood frozen. Maya turned to address the judges. I didn't reveal my identity during the incident because I wanted to experience what ordinary humans face every day. I wanted to know if the promises made when we joined the coalition were real or just words. What I found was exactly what I feared. She gestured toward the holographic display. That footage shows more than one flight attendant being cruel. It shows a system that has failed. Even in first class, even with proper credentials and full payment, I was treated as less than, and I know I'm not alone. Every human who travels coalition space wonders if they'll be next. The courtroom was absolutely silent. This isn't about me, Maya continued. It's about every human who has been passed over for promotions, denied service, treated with contempt, simply because of where they come from. The Sentient Rights Accord exists to prevent exactly this kind of treatment, but laws only matter if they're enforced. She looked directly at Zara. I don't hate you, I don't even know you, but your actions have consequences, and those consequences need to be clear. Discrimination is not acceptable. Not now. Not ever. Maya returned to her seat. The judges conferred quietly among themselves for several minutes. Then Judge Korath raised his hand for silence. We will deliberate and return. With a verdict, this hearing is in recess. The judges filed out. Zara was led back to a holding area. The gallery emptied slowly, with observers discussing what they had witnessed. Darius approached Maya. That was a powerful statement, Captain. Maya nodded. It needed to be said. Not just for me, but for everyone who comes after. Darius smiled slightly. The judges won't take long. This case is clear-cut. He was right. Less than an hour later, the judges returned. Judge Korath's expression was grave as he read the verdict. Zara of Vrex, you are found guilty of discrimination under the Sentient Rights Accord. Your actions were deliberate, malicious, and violated the core principles of this coalition. You are hereby sentenced to 2 years in rehabilitation custody, followed by 5 years of community service educating others about species equality. Zara's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair, her entire body shaking. Judge Korath continued, Captain Vex, you are found negligent in your duties. Your failure to maintain proper oversight allowed a toxic culture to exist on your vessel. You are stripped of your captain's license and fined 3 million credits. The Celestial Horizon is impounded pending a full operational review. Vex made a strangled sound but didn't protest. Part 5. The verdict sent shockwaves through the entire coalition. Within hours, news feeds across hundreds of worlds carried the story. A Vrexian flight attendant had been convicted of discriminating against a human captain, and the punishment had been severe. But the story didn't end with Zara's sentencing. Darius Kane stood before the assembled judges and made his final recommendations. Honored judges, this case has revealed systemic failures that extend far beyond one vessel. I am formally recommending a coalition-wide audit of all passenger transportation services. Every starliner, every shuttle service, every transport company must be reviewed for discriminatory practices. He brought up data on the holographic display, reports of other incidents, complaints that had been dismissed, patterns of behavior that showed humans were routinely treated as second-class passengers. Furthermore, I recommend mandatory anti-discrimination training for all crew members in any position that involves passenger contact. This training should be developed by human cultural experts and coalition ethicists working together. The judges listened carefully. Judge Korath nodded slowly. Your recommendations are noted, Chief Kane. We will forward them to the full Coalition Council for implementation. This court is adjourned. The decision was made. Within days, the Coalition Council voted to implement every one of Darius's recommendations. Corporate executives who ran transportation companies scrambled to comply. Training programs were overhauled. Human oversight committees were established on every major vessel. The entire industry transformed almost overnight. Back on Earth, the reaction was immediate and powerful. The footage of Zara throwing Maya's bag had gone viral, reaching billions of humans across the planet. Protests erupted in major cities. People took to the streets demanding accountability, not just for this one incident, but for decades of subtle and not so subtle discrimination. Human-owned businesses across coalition space began refusing service to any vessel or company that hadn't implemented the new training protocols. Trade routes were disrupted. Economic pressure mounted. The Josiah message was clear. Humanity would no longer tolerate being treated as lesser. The Earth government, led by Secretary General Marcus Lopez, issued a formal statement. Humanity has waited patiently for 3 decades to be treated as equals. We have followed every rule, met every standard, exceeded every expectation. But patience has its limits. The coalition must uphold its promises, or humanity will reconsider its membership. The threat was not idle. Earth had become a major economic and military power within the coalition. Human innovation in technology, medicine, and engineering had proven invaluable. Losing humanity would cripple dozens of industries and destabilize entire sectors of coalition space. The elder species, who had once dismissed humans as primitive newcomers, suddenly realized how much the balance of power had shifted. The Coalition Council called an emergency session. For the first time in history, humans were given equal speaking time with the eldest species. Ambassador Helena Price, humanity's chief representative, stood at the central podium and delivered a speech that would echo through history for too long. Helena began, her voice strong and clear. We have been told to be patient, to earn our place, to prove we belong. But respect is not something that should need to be earned through submission. Respect should be given freely to all sentient beings, regardless of how long they have been traveling the stars. She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. Captain Collins showed us that one person standing up for dignity can change everything. She could have revealed her identity immediately. She could have used her rank to shield herself from discrimination. But she chose to experience what ordinary humans face every day. She chose to let the system reveal its failures. And now we all see the truth. Helena's eyes blazed with passion. We will not be silent anymore. We will not wait patiently while our people are humiliated. We will not accept discrimination in any form on any world in any corner of this coalition. Either we are equals or we are nothing. There is no middle ground. The human delegates erupted in thunderous applause. Many of the alien delegates sat in stunned silence, suddenly realizing that humanity would not be pushed aside or placated with empty promises. The quiet newcomers had found their voice, and it was loud. Meanwhile, far From the political drama, Zara began her sentence in a coalition rehabilitation facility. The facility was designed to help offenders understand their crimes and change their fundamental thinking. Zara was assigned to a human counselor, a soft-spoken psychologist named Dr. Greg Mason. Their first meeting took place in a small, quiet room with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. Zara sat with her arms crossed, her scales still pale with shame. Dr. Mason sat across from her with a patient expression. "I don't need a human telling me how to think." Zara muttered, her voice bitter. Dr. Mason smiled gently. "I'm not here to tell you how to think. I'm here to help you understand why you thought the way you did. And maybe, if you're willing to, help you see what you missed." Zara looked away. "What could you possibly teach me?" Dr. Mason pulled up a holographic display showing images from Earth's history. "I can teach you about where humans come from, about the centuries we spent fighting for equality on our own world, about the civil rights movements, the protests, the sacrifices made by ordinary people who refused to accept discrimination." The images showed crowds marching through streets, people sitting at lunch counters, leaders giving speeches. Zara had never seen any of this before. Human history wasn't taught in most coalition schools. Why would it be? Humans were newcomers. What could their short history possibly teach species that had been civilized for millennia? But as Dr. Mason walked her through the history, the struggles, the setbacks, the victories, Zara began to see something she hadn't expected. These humans had experienced exactly what she had inflicted on Maya. They knew what it felt like to be judged by appearance, to be denied opportunities, to be told they didn't belong, and they had fought back. Not with violence, but with dignity, with peaceful resistance, with laws and courts, and the slow grinding work of changing minds over. The following weeks, Dr. Mason introduced Zara to more human history. She read first-hand accounts from people who had been discriminated against. She watched documentaries about the civil rights era. She attended lectures given by human scholars who explained the psychological damage that discrimination causes. It was painful. Every session forced Zara to confront her own prejudices, to see how her casual cruelty was part of a larger pattern. She began to understand that she hadn't just hurt Maya. She had perpetuated a system that hurt millions of humans across the coalition. One day, Dr. Mason asked her to watch the footage of the incident again. Zara had avoided looking at it since the trial, but now, with weeks of education behind her, she forced herself to watch. She saw Maya's face, the patience in her expression, the quiet dignity even as she was being humiliated. She heard her own words, "Your kind should know your place," and felt sick. How had she ever thought that was acceptable? Zara broke down crying. "I didn't see her as a person," she said through tears. "I just saw a category, a label. I didn't think about who she was or what she had accomplished. I only saw that she was human, and I decided that meant she was less than me." Dr. Mason nodded quietly. "Yes, and that's the first step toward real change, recognizing what you did and understanding why it was wrong. But recognition isn't enough. You have to decide what you're going to do about it." Zara wiped her eyes. "What can I do? I've already ruined my life. My career is over. Everyone knows what I did." Dr. Mason leaned forward. "You can use your experience to help others. You can be living proof that people can change. You can make sure that what happened to Captain Collins never happens to anyone else." Zara looked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "Do you really think I can?" "I know you can," Dr. Mason said, "but you have to choose to do it. No one can make that choice for you." 1 year passed. Zara spent every day in rehabilitation, working with Dr. Mason and other counselors. She attended classes on human history, studied coalition law, and met with families of humans who had experienced discrimination. Each session was difficult, but slowly, steadily, her understanding grew. She learned about Earth's civil rights movements, about leaders who had fought for equality without violence. She read speeches by humans who had demanded justice even when the world told them to be patient. She saw parallels between what humans had endured on their own planet and what they now faced in coalition space. The most powerful moment came when Dr. Mason arranged for her to meet a human family whose daughter had been denied admission to a prestigious academy because the admissions officer believed humans weren't intelligent enough. The daughter, a brilliant young woman named Kate, sat across from Zara and told her story without anger or bitterness. She simply explained how it felt to have her dreams crushed because of something she couldn't control. "I studied harder than anyone," Kate said. "I scored higher on every test. But none of that mattered because the person reading my application saw my species and decided that was all they needed to know." Zara listened with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't understand. I thought I was just maintaining standards. I thought humans needed to prove themselves first." Kate looked at her steadily. "Why should we have to prove ourselves more than anyone else? Why should we work twice as hard for half the respect? We're people. We deserve the same chances as everyone else." The conversation changed something fundamental in Zara. She began to see humans not as a category or a species to be judged, but as individuals with hopes, dreams, and dignity. The realization was painful but necessary. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the reforms Darius had recommended were being implemented. Every major transportation company now employed human liaison officers who monitored crew behavior and handled discrimination complaints. Training programs had been completely redesigned with mandatory modules on species equality and unconscious bias, but the changes went deeper than policy. Universities across coalition space began offering courses on human history and culture. Museums created exhibits about Earth's civil rights movements and the lessons they held for other species. Young aliens studied the speeches of human leaders and drew inspiration from their struggles. Humanity, once viewed as primitive newcomers, had become teachers. Their experience with discrimination, both the suffering they had endured and the methods they had used to overcome it, became a blueprint for addressing inequality throughout the coalition. Maya continued her work as a diplomatic officer. She traveled to dozens of worlds negotiating treaties, mediating disputes, and representing humanity's interests. But everywhere she went, she carried the memory of that day on the celestial horizon. It reminded her why her work mattered. One evening, Maya stood on the observation deck of the Pathfinder looking out at the stars. Lisa Chen joined her carrying 2 cups of tea. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Lisa spoke. "I've been reading the reports," Lisa said. "The reforms are working. Discrimination complaints are down across the board. More humans are being hired for senior positions. Things are actually changing." Maya nodded. "It's progress, but it's not enough. One case, one verdict shouldn't have been necessary to make the coalition live up to its promises. This should have been the standard from the beginning." Lisa sipped her tea. "You could have handled it differently. You could have revealed yourself immediately and avoided the whole confrontation." Maya shook her head. "Then, it would have been about protecting me because of my rank. It wouldn't have addressed the underlying problem. Ordinary humans needed to know that the law would protect them too. Not just captains or diplomats, but every person who travels coalition space." Lisa smiled slightly. "Mission accomplished then?" Maya's expression was thoughtful. "Maybe, but there's still work to do. Changing laws and policies is one thing. Changing hearts and minds takes longer." As if summoned by her words, Maya's communicator buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her eyebrows rose. It's a message from the rehabilitation facility. Zara wants to meet with me. Lisa's eyes widened. Will you go? Maya considered for a moment. Yes, I think I will. 2 days later, Maya walked into a small meeting room at the rehabilitation facility. Zara sat at a table, her scales healthier looking than they had been at the trial, but her eyes still carried shame. Dr. Mason stood near the wall, observing but giving them space. Captain Collins, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. Maya sat down across from her. You wanted to speak with me. Zara nodded. I need to say something. I don't expect forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did wrong. I understand the pain I caused not just to you, but to every human who has been treated the way I treated you. She took a shaky breath. I've spent a year learning about your people, about your history, about everything you've overcome, and I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that I was part of the problem, that I made things harder instead of better. Maya listened without interrupting. I want to do better. Zara continued. Dr. Mason says I can use my experience to help others, to make sure they don't make the same mistakes I did. I want to spend the rest of my life teaching about equality, about seeing people as individuals, not categories. She finally met Maya's eyes. I know I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make sure it never happens again. That's my choice. That's my commitment. Maya studied her for a long moment. The anger she had felt that day on the ship had faded, leaving only a quiet determination. She could see that Zara had genuinely changed, that this wasn't just words but real understanding. I believe you, Maya said finally. And that's why I came. Not to punish you further, but to tell you that your journey isn't over. You have a chance to be part of the solution. You can help create the world we all want to live in, one where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of where they come from. Zara's eyes filled with tears. I will. I promise I will. Maya stood. Good. Because the coalition needs people who have made mistakes and learned from them. You can teach in a way that others can't. You know what prejudice looks like from the inside. Use that knowledge. As Maya left the facility, she felt something shift. This wasn't just about punishment or revenge. It was about transformation. One person's cruelty had exposed a broken system, but that same person's redemption could help heal. Change didn't happen all at once. It happened one heart, one mind, one person at a time. And Maya realized that this was the real victory. Not the trial or the verdict, but this moment, a former discriminator choosing to become an advocate. That was how you built a better future. 18 months after the incident, Zara completed her rehabilitation and began her community service. She had changed in ways that went deeper than anyone could have predicted. Her understanding of discrimination had transformed from abstract concepts to lived knowledge. She had read thousands of pages about human history, watched countless documentaries, and spoken with hundreds of people who had experienced prejudice firsthand. Now it was time to put that knowledge to work. Her first speaking engagement was at a coalition-sponsored training center, where new crew members for passenger vessels came to learn their jobs. Zara stood before a room of young aliens, Vrexians, Morthani Quilarians, and others, who would soon be working on starliners across the galaxy. The instructor introduced her. This is Zara of Vrex. Some of you may recognize her name. She was convicted under the Sentient Rights Accord for discriminating against a human passenger. She's here today to share her experience and help you avoid making the same mistakes. The room was silent. Everyone knew about the case. Zara's name had become infamous, a cautionary tale about what happened when you let prejudice guide your actions. Zara stepped forward. My name is Zara, and I destroyed my life because of hatred. She began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I had a good job, a promising career, a future, and I threw it all away in one moment of cruelty. She pulled up the security footage, the same footage that had been played at her trial. The room watched as she grabbed Maya's bag and threw it aside. They heard her venomous words. Some of the students shifted uncomfortably. I looked at that woman, and I didn't see a person. Zara continued. I didn't see a decorated captain or a brilliant diplomat. I didn't even see a fellow sentient being trying to travel peacefully. All I saw was her species. And because she was human, I decided she was less than me. She paused, letting that sink in. I convinced myself I was maintaining standards, that I was protecting the quality of service. But the truth is, I was just scared. Scared that humans were becoming important. Scared that the galaxy was changing. Scared that my prejudices would be proven wrong. A young Quillarian raised a tentative hand. Why are you telling us this? Zara looked at the student. Because some of you are sitting there right now thinking the same things I thought. You're wondering if humans really deserve to be in first class. You're questioning whether they're truly equal to older species. You're carrying prejudices you might not even realize you have. She walked closer to the group. I'm here to tell you that those thoughts will destroy you. Not because of the legal consequences, though those are severe, but because prejudice eats away at your soul. It makes you smaller, meaner, less than you could be. It prevents you from seeing the incredible diversity and beauty of this coalition we're all part of. Over the following months, Zara spoke at dozens of training centers, schools, and corporate headquarters. Her message was always the same. Discrimination hurts everyone involved. She showed the footage, she told her story, and she answered questions with brutal honesty. At one university, a Morthani student challenged her. You say you've changed, but how do we know you're not just saying what people want to hear? Zara nodded. That's a fair question. You can't know for certain. All you can do is watch my actions over time. But I can tell you this. I've spent the past year learning about human history. I've met families who have experienced discrimination. I've seen the pain that my kind of thinking causes. She pulled up images from Earth's civil rights era, protesters being attacked for demanding equality laws being passed to protect basic rights. These people fought for centuries to be treated with dignity, and when they finally reached the stars, they thought they had escaped that struggle, but species like mine brought it right back to them. The student looked thoughtful. I never thought about it that way. That's the problem, Zara replied. Most people don't. They go through their lives never questioning their assumptions. I'm here to make you question everything, to make you see that every being you meet deserves respect until they prove otherwise through their actions, not their appearance. Word of Zara's speeches spread. She became one of the most requested speakers on anti-discrimination education. Organizations across coalition space invited her to train their staff. Her willingness to expose her own failures made her message powerful in a way that traditional educators couldn't match. Meanwhile, Maya's work continued to shape the future of the coalition. She attended a critical session of the Coalition Council, where humanity's full voting rights were being debated. The chamber was packed with delegates from hundreds of worlds. The tension was high. Ambassador Helena Price presented humanity's case. She spoke about Earth's contributions to the coalition, about human innovation and sacrifice. She referenced the incident with Zara not as a grievance, but as evidence that change was necessary. That incident showed us two things, Helena said. First, it showed that discrimination against humans is real and systemic. Second, it showed that when the law is enforced fairly, change is possible. Captain Collins could have remained silent. Instead, she exposed a problem that needed fixing. That's the kind of leadership humanity brings to this council. The vote was called 1. By 1, delegates raised their hands or activated their voting panels. Maya watched from the gallery, her heart pounding. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The results appeared on the main display. The motion for full human voting rights passed unanimously. The human delegation erupted in cheers. 3 decades of patience, 3 decades of proving themselves, 3 decades of fighting for equality had culminated in this moment. Humanity was no longer a junior member of the coalition. They were full partners with equal voice and equal power. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, letting the relief wash over her. This was what she had been working toward. This was why she had endured that humiliation on the celestial horizon. This was why the fight mattered. After the session, Maya stood in a quiet corridor looking out at the stars through a massive viewport. Darius Kane found her there. "Congratulations, Captain," he said. "You did it." Maya smiled. "We did it. All of us. You for enforcing the law. Zara for choosing to change. Every human who refused to accept discrimination. This wasn't one person's victory." Darius nodded. "Still, it started with you. You could have used your rank to shield yourself. Instead, you exposed the truth. That took courage." Maya turned to face him. "It took necessity. Our people needed to know that justice was possible, that the law would protect them. Without that knowledge, they might have given up." She looked back at the stars. "Now we have a different challenge. We have power. The question is what we do with it." Darius smiled slightly. "Knowing you, Captain, I suspect we'll use it wisely." 5 years after the incident, the galaxy had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible before. Human influence permeated every sector of coalition space. Starliners operated with mixed crews where humans and aliens worked side by side with mutual respect. Universities taught courses on Earth history, alongside the histories of elder species. Museums displayed artifacts from human civil rights movements as examples of courage and perseverance. The celestial horizon had been sold and completely restructured under new ownership. The luxury liner that had been the site of discrimination now boasted one of the most diverse and well-trained crews in the transportation industry. A plaque in the main cabin commemorated what had happened there and why change had been necessary. Zara had completed her community service, but she never stopped her work. She had become one of the coalition's most respected educators, traveling from world to world teaching about equality and the dangers of prejudice. Schools invited her to speak to students. Corporations hired her to train executives. Government agencies consulted her on policy. On this particular day, she stood in a classroom on a distant colony world facing a group of young Vrexian students. They looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. One student, a girl named Vera, raised her hand. "Why should we listen to someone who did something so terrible?" Vera asked bluntly. It was a question Zara had heard many times, but she never gave a rehearsed answer. Each time she responded from the heart, "Because I can tell you what hatred looks like from the inside." She said, "I can tell you how easy it is to convince yourself that cruelty is justified. I can explain how prejudice starts small, just a thought, a judgment, and grows until it controls your actions." She walked closer to the students. "I can also tell you that change is possible, that you can recognize your mistakes, admit them, and spend the rest of your life making things better. If I can change, anyone can, but you have to want to. You have to choose to see others as equals." Vera considered this. "Do you ever talk to Captain Collins?" Zara smiled. "Occasionally. She checks in on my work sometimes. We're not friends. That would be asking too much. But we have a mutual understanding. We both want the same thing. A galaxy where what happened between us never happens again." After the class ended, Zara received a message on her communicator. It was from Maya. Captain Collins was requesting a meeting. Zara felt her heart skip. They hadn't spoken in over a year. They met at a neutral location, a peaceful garden on a space station halfway between their current positions. Maya arrived first dressed in her civilian clothes. Zara approached nervously, still feeling the weight of what she had done all those years ago. Captain. Zara greeted her. Maya gestured to a bench. Sit, please. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the artificial waterfall in the center of the garden. Finally, Maya spoke. I've been following your work. You've become quite the advocate. Zara nodded. I'm trying. It's the least I can do. Maya turned to look at her. It's more than that. You're teaching people things they wouldn't learn from anyone else. You have credibility because you lived through both sides, the hatred and the healing. That's valuable. Thank you, Zara said quietly. That means a lot coming from you. Maya smiled slightly. I asked you here because I have a proposal. The Coalition Council is creating a new division focused on equality and civil rights. They want someone to lead the education initiatives, someone who understands both the problem and the solution. I recommended you. Zara's eyes widened. You recommended me, but you're qualified. Maya interrupted. You've spent 5 years proving that people can change. You've trained thousands of individuals, taught countless classes, and helped create policies that actually work. The council needs someone with your experience. Zara was silent for a long moment. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Maya replied. Turn your mistake into a legacy. Show the entire galaxy that redemption is real. Zara met her eyes. I will. I accept. They shook hands, a human custom that had become common throughout the coalition. As they stood, to leave, Zara stopped. Captain, why did you help me? After everything I did, why would you give me this opportunity? Maya looked at her thoughtfully. Because this was never about revenge. It was about change. You chose to change, and now you can help others do the same. That's how we build a better future, one transformed person at a time. Meanwhile, aboard the Pathfinder, Maya's crew was preparing for their next mission. Lisa Chen greeted Maya as she boarded. How did it go? Maya smiled. She accepted. In a few months, Zara will be running the Coalition's civil rights education programs. Lisa raised her eyebrows. That's quite a turnaround. It's the right choice. Maya said, she's earned it. They walked onto the bridge together. The crew was assembled, humans and aliens working side by side just as it should be. Maya took her seat in the captain's chair and looked at the view screen showing the vast expanse of space ahead. Where to, Captain? Lisa asked. Maya thought about the journey they had all taken. From that moment of discrimination on the celestial horizon to this moment of hope and possibility. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it not through force but through courage. The courage to stand up for dignity even when it was hard. Everywhere. Maya said, there's a whole galaxy out there that needs to understand what humanity stands for. Equality, dignity, justice. And we're going to show them, the Pathfinders. Engines hummed to life. The ship turned toward the stars and accelerated into the endless black. Behind them, the space station faded into the distance. Ahead lay infinite possibilities. Back on Earth, news of humanity's continued progress spread. Through every city and town, children learned about Captain Maya Collins in school. Her story became required reading, not as propaganda, but as history. A reminder that one person standing up for what's right can change everything. The incident on the celestial horizon was studied in universities across Coalition space. Legal scholars analyzed the case. Ethicists debated its implications. But most importantly, ordinary people, human and alien alike, understood its lesson. Discrimination has no place in a civilized society. Not now. Not ever. Years would pass. Decades would pass. New generations would grow up in a galaxy where humans were fully equal partners in the coalition. They would never know the struggles of those early years. They would never experience the casual cruelty that had once been so common. And when they asked their elders how things had changed so dramatically, the answer was always the same. One woman refused to accept discrimination. 1. Legal officer enforced the law without compromise. One former discriminator chose to change and dedicate her life to education. Together, they proved that justice was possible. Humanity didn't just survive in the stars. They thrived. They became leaders not through domination but through example. They showed the galaxy what it meant to fight for equality with dignity and determination. They proved that strength came not from putting others down, but from lifting everyone up, and that, as they say, is very fucking yeah.